Hi, I'm Jim Ward of the Middle Country Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode in our History Bites series. Today we will discuss the Wright Brothers, who succeeded in flying the first free controlled flight of a power-driven, heavier-than airplane on December 17th, 1903. Wilbur Wright was born on April 16, 1867, near Millville, Indiana. He was the middle child in a family of 5 children. His father, Milton Wright, was a bishop in the Church of the United Brethren in Christ. His mother was Susan Catherine Corner. The family later moved to Dayton, Ohio. As a child, Wilbur's playmate was his younger brother, Orville Wright, born in 1871 in Dayton. Milton Wright's preaching took him on the road frequently, and he often brought back small toys for his children. In 1878, he brought back a small model helicopter for his boys. Made of cork, bamboo, and paper, and powered by a rubber band to twirl its blades, the model was based on a design by the French aeronautical pioneer Alphonse Pénaud. Fascinated by the toy and its mechanics, Wilbur and Orville would develop a lifelong love of aeronautics and flying. In 1889, the brothers started their own newspaper, the West Side News. Wilbur edited the paper, and Orville was the publisher. The brothers also shared a passion for bicycles, a new craze that was sweeping the country. In 1892, Wilbur and Orville opened a bike shop, fixing bicycles and selling their own design. Always working on different mechanical projects and keeping up with scientific research, the Wright brothers closely followed the research of German aviator Otto Lilienthal. When Lilienthal died in a glider crash, the brothers decided to start their own experiments with flight. Determined to develop their own successful design, Wilbur and Orville headed to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, known for its strong winds. Since 1899, Wilbur and Orville Wright had been scientifically experimenting with the concepts of flight. They labored in relative obscurity, while the experiments of Samuel Langley of the Smithsonian were followed in the press and underwritten by the War Department. Yet Langley, as others before him, had failed to achieve powered flight. They relied on brute power to keep their theoretically stable machines aloft, sending along a hapless passenger and hoping for the best. It was the Wrights' genius and vision to see that humans would have to fly their machines, that the problems of flight could not be solved from the ground. In Wilbur's words, quote, "It is possible to fly without motors, but not without knowledge and skill," end quote. With over 1,000 glides from atop Big Kill Devil Hill, the Wrights made themselves the first true pilots. These flying skills were a crucial component of their invention. Before they ever attempted powered flight, the Wright brothers were masters of the air. Their glider experiments on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, though frustrating at times, had led them down the path of discovery. Through those experiments, they had solved the problem of sustained lift, and more importantly, they could now control an aircraft while in flight. The brothers felt they were now ready to truly fly. But first, the Wrights had to power their aircraft. Gasoline engine technology had recently advanced to where its use in airplanes was feasible. Unable to find a suitable lightweight commercial engine, the brothers designed their own. It was cruder and less powerful than Samuel Langley's, but the Wrights understood that relatively little power was needed with efficient lifting surfaces and propellers. Such propellers were not available, however. Scant relevant data could be derived from marine propeller theory. Using their air tunnel data, they designed the first efficient airplane propeller, one of their most original and purely scientific achievements. Returning to their camp at the Kill Devil Hills, they mounted the engine on the new 40-foot, 605-pound flyer with double tails and elevators. The engine drove 2 pusher propellers with chains, one crossed to make the props rotate in opposite directions to counteract a twisting tendency in flight. A bulky engine and broken propeller shaft slowed them until they were finally ready on December 14, 1903. In order to decide who would fly first, the brothers tossed a coin. Wilbur won the coin toss, but had lost his chance to be the first to fly when he oversteered with the elevator after leaving the launching rail. The flyer climbed too steeply, stalled, and dove into the sand. the first flight would have to wait on repairs. 3 days later, they were ready for the second attempt. The 27-mile-per-hour wind was harder than they would have liked since their predicted cruising speed was only 30 to 35 miles per hour. The headwind would slow their ground speed to a crawl, but they proceeded anyway. With a sheet, they signaled the volunteers from the nearby life-saving station that they were about to try again. Now it was Orville's turn. Remembering Wilbur's experience, he positioned himself and tested the controls. The stick that moved the horizontal elevator controlled climb and descent. The cradle that he swung with his hips warped his wings and swung the vertical tails, which in combination turned the machine. A lever controlled the gas flow and airspeed recorder. The controls were simple and few, but Orville knew it would take all his finesse to handle the new and heavier aircraft. At 10:35 a.m., he released the restraining wire. The flyer moved down the rail as Wilbur steadied the wings. Just as Orville left the ground, John Daniels from the life-saving station snapped the shutter on a preset camera, capturing the historic image of the airborne aircraft with Wilbur running alongside. Again, the flyer was unruly, pitching up and down as Orville overcompensated with the controls. But he kept it aloft for 12 seconds until it hit the sand about 120 feet from the rail. Into the 27-mile-per-hour wind, the ground speed had been 6.8 miles per hour for a total airspeed of 34 miles per hour. The brothers took turns flying 3 more times that day, getting a feel for the controls and increasing their distance with each flight. Wilbur's second flight, the fourth and last of the day, was an impressive 852 feet in 59 seconds. The Wright brothers soon found that their success was not appreciated by all. Many in the press, as well as fellow flight experts, were reluctant to believe the brothers' claims at all. As a result, Wilbur set out for Europe in 1908, where he hoped he would have more success convincing the public and selling airplanes. In France, Wilbur found a much more receptive audience. He made many public flights and gave rides to officials, journalists, and statesmen. In 1909, Orville joined his brother in Europe, as did their younger sister Catherine. The Wrights became huge celebrities there, hosted by royals and heads of state, and constantly featured in the press. The Wrights began to sell their airplanes in Europe before returning to the United States in 1909. The brothers became wealthy businessmen, filling contracts for airplanes in Europe and the United States. Wilbur and Orville always shared credit for their innovations and maintained a close relationship throughout their lives. Behind the scenes, however, there was a division of labor. With his sharp instincts, Wilbur was the business mind and executive of the operation, serving as president of the Wright Company. Wilbur fell ill on a trip to Boston in April 1912. He was diagnosed with typhoid fever and died on May 30th at his family home in Dayton, Ohio. Milton Wright wrote in his diary, quote, "A short life full of consequences, an unfailing intellect, imperturbable temper, great self-reliance, and as great modesty, seeing the right clearly, pursuing it steadily, he lived and died," end quote. Orville spent the last 3 decades of his life serving on boards and committees related to aeronautics, including the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, the predecessor to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Neither Orville nor Wilbur ever married. On January 30th, 1948, Orville died after suffering a second heart attack. He is buried at the Wright family plot in Dayton, Ohio. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's episode. If you enjoyed it, click like, and if you watched on YouTube, hit subscribe. Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.